Hi, my name is Dave Munkitrick, and I'd like to congratulate you on your purchase of the modern Longworth chuck. I'm here to take you through all the steps you'll need to get the most out of this chuck, and we're going to cover all the sizes available. So why don't we just get started? The primary purpose of the Longworth chuck is to finish the bottom or the foot of a bowl. It's meant to be used with just light cuts, just light finishing cuts on the bottom of a bowl. Now there's a lot of ways to get your bowl to that point. The way I do it is to start out my rough cuts with the face plate and get the outside of the bowl turned first. And I like to use a little nub for my 4-jaw chuck to grab onto. I leave at the bottom here. So all my rough heavy cuts on the outside are done with the face plate, and then the rough hollowing, getting the bowl hollowed out, is done with a 4-jaw chuck. Once all that's done, then we can move on to the Longworth chuck. As you can see here, I've got a bowl that's finished on the inside, and on the outside all we have to do is remove this foot, this nub on the bottom, and create a nice foot. And that's where our Longworth chuck is going to come into play. All the Longworth chucks come completely assembled and ready to use right out of the box. They all work in an identical fashion. You have 2 phenolic plates here and some soft buttons that hold the bowl in place. The plates slide by, and you can see the self-centering action of the buttons. The buttons themselves are made of a soft, compressible material, so that when you tighten the wing nut on the back, it actually compresses the soft material and holds that bowl rim even tighter. Now, the softness of the material also prevents any kind of damage to your bowl as it's being turned. The attachment points, these plates are designed for all the smaller ones. The 10, 12, 14, and 16 inch come with a 2 1/4 chuck plate that's designed to mount in any kind of number 2 jaw, whether it's dovetail or serrated. That's on the smaller sizes. When you move up to the larger ones, the 20 and the 24, come with a larger plate. This is a 4 1/4 inch mounting plate that requires the larger number 3 jaws. Now you can put this bigger mounting plate on any of the smaller chucks. You can't go the other way around. The other thing with the 20 and the 24 inches, it has 16 buttons versus 8 on all the other ones. And you use all 16 for any large diameter work. Once you get down to a certain point, though, you'll see that half the buttons are going to bottom out, and it won't go any smaller. And the reason for that is if they continued this track, obviously you'd lose structural strength down in here, and you don't need all 16 once you get to a smaller diameter. So at this point, you'd remove every other button and turn this into an 8-button chuck, just like all the other ones. Occasionally you'll find it's necessary to remove a button from the chuck, whether to replace the soft portion or to go to a shorter size. And that's an accessory that we'll be talking about later in the video. But for whatever reason that you may need to remove a button, it's important that you get it back on in the correct way on the chuck. You'll notice we've taken this button apart, and it consists of the stud. You've got your washer on top, the soft button, another washer, and in here is where the plate goes, a washer on the bottom, the wing nut, and then this soft rubber cap that covers the threads on the bottom. The most important part not only is the sequence, but also you'll notice on the washers there's a rounded side and then there's a flat side. It's very important that the rounded side contact phenolic plates. That just helps them slide easier against each other. So The best way to do it really is to do one at a time. You can reference all the other ones that way to see how they were put on the chuck. Don't take them all off at once and then you're kind of lost. So do one at a time, and also really pay attention to that rounded side of the washer versus the flat side. And you'll be fine. Mounting your bowl on your chuck couldn't be easier. We're going to do this on a tabletop. You could also do this with the chuck already mounted on the lathe. If you're doing multiple bowls and you don't want to be popping it on and off the lathe, that's just fine, but it's just easier to show here on our bench. Now you want to start out with the buttons in, I guess, what we would call a zero position, meaning they're not too loose and they're not too tight. Now if the buttons are very loose in there, they can bind in the channels as you're adjusting the size and make it difficult to adjust. So what you want to do is just lightly put some finger pressure just on the head of that bolt and just spin that wing nut just so it just barely contacts the phenolic plate. You hardly want to have any pressure on there. You'll find if you get even just a hair too tight, it's very hard to move the plates. But we also want to get a good zero starting point on tightening these buttons. So we've got those all set. Plate moves just fine. We'll set our bowl in here. Doesn't matter where you center it or set it, because the buttons automatically center the bowl on the chuck. And you just want to get it finger tight like that, and you'll be surprised at how tight that is already. And the next step is to move on to tightening each one of these buttons. Now when we do that, you want to do this just like you would tightening the lug nuts on a tire. So you'd start here, move to there, go 90 degrees, opposite side, move over one, opposite side, opposite side. So that way you're concentrically tightening those buttons on either side, opposite sides of the bowl, so it doesn't shift off center. So why don't we go ahead and do that. And you want to have equal amount of compression on each button, so it's good to count your turns. Usually with a wing nut it's easy to do half turns. 6 would be a minimum, maybe 10 would be as far as you'd ever want to go. But let's go shoot for the middle here. We'll count to 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then we want to go to the opposite side. Bring that up. And you can probably see those buttons compressing and squeezing that bowl rim just a little bit harder. 6, 7, 8. And you just work your way around. 7, 8. Again, go to the opposite. 7, 8. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8. And if you look at if you lose track of whether you've done all your buttons or not, you can tell by how much thread is exposed, because it tightens down quite a bit. So I see I've got a couple more here left to do. 7, 8. And then just take a look at the bowl. Make sure it's sitting flat on the chuck. It's nice and secure. I can't budge that thing, so we're all set to go to the lathe. Now that we have our bowl properly mounted in the chuck, we're ready to mount the chuck itself onto the lathe. Now normally we'd have our 4-jaw chuck on the lathe, but I took it off just for illustration purposes here. This is a dovetail jaw. There's also scroll chucks with serrated jaws. Either one works equally well with the mounting plate that we have here on the Longworth. Now here you can see the mounting plate. This groove here is beveled to take the dovetail shape of these jaws. You can see how nicely that fits in there. Before, though, that you mount your plate onto your jaw, you want to inspect your scroll chuck. Just make sure there's no burrs along here where it makes contact with this ledge. That would throw your Longworth chuck off center. So you can see here there's no burrs, nice clean fit, and all you do is clamp it down at that point and you're ready to go. We're all set to mount our bowl onto the lathe. First, let's talk about a couple safety considerations. First of all, you want to make sure your chuck is in good shape, the buttons aren't torn or ripped. If they are, you want to replace the buttons, even before you have the bowl mounted on there. Our chuck is good to go, no burrs. The other important thing is the RPM limitations on this chuck. 600 RPM is the maximum, so you want to make sure that this is already set at 600 or lower. You don't want to turn it on and have it spinning at 1200 RPM all of a sudden. So make sure your lathe is already set below 600 RPM. You want to have a face shield handy, always to protect your face. If you have long sleeves like I do, make sure they're rolled up and out of the way. You don't want any loose clothing that can get tangled up on your lathe. That just about covers it, so let's go ahead and mount our bowl on the scroll chuck. It just fits right inside those dovetail jaws. Tighten her down. Make sure that the jaws are in contact with the plate all the way around evenly. I like to go around and tighten several times. Don't just use one. You always want to use them all and keep going around. Give them about the same amount of twist as you would, and just keep going until you feel it's not moving anymore, that it's not tightening anymore. You'll be surprised. You feel like it's all tight here. There's still a little bit left to do over here. So keep going around. Make sure it's setting tight and even. You can give it a spin and you can see how that's just rolling beautifully. Okay. The other safety consideration is going to be using your tailstock whenever is possible. We want to have that tailstock helping to hold this bowl in position. You don't want to point in there because that's going to mar the foot that we're trying to make look nice. A nice little trick is just to use a little wooden ball. You can get those at any hardware store. And just push it on there till it makes contact. Tighten everything down. Again, give it a little test spin. Everything looks good. And then we'll set our tool rest. Just below center. Lock that into position. Everything is tight, everything is clear, and we're ready to turn. One last thing I'd like to talk about before we actually start making cuts here. Sometimes, when you turn a bowl, your rim, may get out of round. Who knows? There's always, this is a natural product. You can't guarantee that it's going to be perfectly round. You may find that the bowl isn't quite centered the way you want it. I usually just use a little straight edge here to check to see. If I think it's off center, this will tell me which side is off center. This one's a bit off, probably acceptable, but we'll go ahead and adjust this anyhow. So you find the point where it's too close to you, where it's off center, and just go ahead and tighten these buttons a couple turns. On the tight side, flip it around to the opposite and maybe loosen them just a bit. and that'll often just shift that bowl just a little bit to help center it again. And now we're all set, ready to turn off this foot. Now when I take off the foot, I just keep using my bowl gouge and get rid of that material first, and then we'll go to the lighter cuts to finish the foot itself. Now it's critical to remember that you always want to take light cuts. You can take a big heavy cut with a bowl gouge, but we just want to keep it light and just work our way down, get rid of that stub tenon. Now even though the bowl gouge is capable of making heavy cuts, you want to make sure you take really nice light passes as you're taking off your stub tenon and creating your foot. Now I use a bowl gouge, at least for this stage of the work. You can use whatever tool you prefer. If you want to part it off, if you want to use a scraper, it's up to you. Just make sure you take the light cuts. And that's the key to working with this chuck. Now at this point I've done pretty much all I can do with this tailstock still in place. I'm going to have to get this out of the way in order to finish off the rest of the foot. So we'll just back this off, take our ball out. Now I've gone as far as I can with the tailstock in place, so I'm just going to slide that out of the way and finish taking off that little nub. Now I've got that stub tenon removed and I've got the start of a nice little foot here, and I'd go on with some smaller tools, probably a small gouge, and you can add all kinds of decorative elements to the bottom here, little rings, little beads, and just scoop out that foot, give it a little more definition to that foot, hit it with some sandpaper and burn your name in the bottom and you're set to go. There are times when you turn something like this plate and you'll have a very thin edge. Sometimes, depending on the plate and the thinness of the edge, it can actually slip underneath the buttons. So in order to kick this out so it'll purchase and contact those buttons more directly, you can get these accessory thin rim rings, they call them. They just set right on top of the buttons or slip over the buttons. And what that does is cover up that space where that washer sits right underneath the button. And then your plate can just rest right on top of the ring, and you just squeeze down your buttons as you normally would and do your tightening sequence. And that'll hold your plate in place without it scooting underneath any of those buttons. In addition to finishing off the foot on bowls and plates, you can use your Longworth chuck to face off ring turnings, such as this one, this segmented ring turning, where you just want to flatten the surface so you can stack your laminations. But in order to do so, you need to make sure that these buttons are below the surface, because you're going to be wanting to make your cut, from the outside all the way in. We're not just working on the center like we were with the feet. So in order to accomplish that, you can replace these, the stock longer buttons that I'm showing here. This is what comes with the chuck, with these accessory 1/2-inch buttons. That brings the surface and the head of these bolts, down another 1/4 inch so that you could fit a ring in. And if you've got an even thinner ring, you can add these thin rim spacers and then mount your ring in the chuck as you normally would, and just make sure it's seated in there properly, and then go ahead and do your sequence turning of the wing nuts in the back as you normally would. Some bowls will have a narrower opening than a base, and in cases like that you can still use your Longworth chuck to finish off the bottom. But what we're going to do is grab the bowl from the inside instead of from the outside. So same procedure, only you're going over the buttons now, and you'll expand the rings till they make contact again, and you can hold it on so it seats tight against the face of the chuck. And now, in order to tighten down these bolts, now that we can't put our finger on the head of the bolt anymore, you have to hold black rubber on the back and do your counting. So again, you'd work your way around in the same manner, counting your turns, going to the opposite side until the bowl's secure. And there you go. I'd keep going and have it completely secure if I was going to actually turn off the foot here. Now, another application that this chuck is capable of is working with what I would call a semi-natural edge on a bowl. Now here you've got a natural edge and a natural edge, but we still got two flats. Now this will not work on a bowl that has a complete natural uneven edge all the way around. It's just, there's no way for it to hold tight down to the plates themselves. Remember, you want these just loose enough so that the plates slide freely. And this will be an outside grip. But as long as we've got, at the very minimum, 2 on each side holding the bowl in place, you're in good shape. In this case, we've got 3 on each side. So we're going to be fine, and go around and again, tighten these up. And even the ones that don't make contact, I recommend that you tighten those up enough so that they're just stiff and stay in place and aren't loose as the chuck is spinning around. So once again, we do our 180-degree opposites as we go around, and counting our turns until the bowl's secure. If you find that any of your buttons become worn or damaged, you can replace them. There are replacement buttons available. You can get just the button, or you can get the entire assembly. Either way, and that'll help keep your Longworth chuck operating to peak performance. Just a couple words about storing your Longworth chuck. The most important thing is don't leave the buttons under compression. Make sure you've got them all loose and free before you put them away anywhere. The other thing is, it's perfectly okay to hang these on a wall. Not recommended that you put them in a drawer unless they're by themselves in a drawer. You don't want to stack things on here or run any risk of of damaging your buttons in any way. When you're done using it, it's a good idea just to blow the dust off there, just to get that accumulated dust off of the chuck itself. Otherwise, there's really not much to worry about in terms of maintenance. These Longworth chucks are just going to do a great job of adding a whole new dimension to your bowl turning, giving the foot of your bowl a nice professional look instead of just a plain old parted bottom. If you're a little bit nervous about, finishing your bowl, the first bowl, a nice bowl that you've got turned, and you're a little worried about doing this, go ahead and just do a few practice turns just on a disc. Come up with a design you like. You can make that your signature on all your bowls. You're going to have a lot of fun with these chucks. So enjoy your turning and be safe.